Okay, everyone. Okay, let's resume. Okay, today we are very lucky as well. We have got the next speaker, Dr. Kelly Cassidy. So she is a clinical psychologist and owner of Prosper Health Collective. And her office is actually quite close to here, near Garbo. And so she actually has a doctorate in clinical psychology from the Murdoch University and Bachelor of Science from the Curtin University. And also Kelly does a lot of teaching as well in Murdoch as well, yeah. And uh, so apart from that, she's passionate about um, children, and I think she works a lot with kids who have got anxiety, ADHD, autism, yeah, and she's quite passionate about those topics. So she's the right person to be here and to give this next talk. And apart from that, she's also a mom of two. And so we all, as moms, as parents, we know the difficulties of dealing with kids. So yeah, okay, we'll just let Kelly share her talk.
All right, we'll try again. That's better. So, I think what I want to talk to you about today is really all of the things that we can do to make our children as emotionally strong as possible. And that's what I'm really going to hope that you walk away from today, is that you have a sense of those things. So, tying into those questions that we had at the end of the last talk, that you'll have some ideas of what are those things that we can do no matter what stage of life our children are at. But also, what I want you to walk away from this afternoon is feeling comfortable knowing that if your child is struggling a little bit, if they're not doing the things that we might expect them to do, that that's okay too, that there is help out there, that there's nothing bad or wrong with them if they're having a few struggles, and that there definitely are things that we can do to get them back on track. So what are the signs that our kids are emotionally healthy? If they're emotionally healthy, then they're going to be expressing their feelings, and particularly they're going to be able to know what their feelings are. So you would be surprised how many children I see who actually can't name feelings or know what they're feeling. Obviously, they're going to be sleeping and eating well. They're going to have lots of energy. They're going to be playful. They're going to want to play. If our children are emotionally healthy, they're likely to be curious. They want to learn. And they're going to be having positive relationships both with friends and within their family as well. So they're the sorts of things that we're certainly going to be looking out for to know that our kids are doing well. Now, something really important that I want you to think about is happiness the goal that we have for our children? Are we aiming to make them happy? When I put this presentation together, I actually had to really resist calling it How to Have Happy Kids, because I know as parents and myself as a parent, that's what I want to do. I want my kids to be happy. But actually, that's not our goal as parents. It's not our goal to make our kids happy. They'll be happy sometimes, but remembering that happiness is actually just a state of being that comes and goes, just like the rain comes and goes. So we can't be expecting our kids to be happy all the time. They are going to experience lots of trials and tribulations in their life that are going to make them not happy, and that's okay too. So I really want you to think about that and the fact that that's not our primary aim. The other thing that I want you to think about is that our kids won't always be worry or stress-free, and also that's okay. It might just be a sign that they're going through a particular phase of development that means that they're experiencing that. But there are certainly things that we can do to help get them back on track and to support them through those different phases that they're going through. So I want to talk through now might be some of those red flags, the things that are going to tell us that our kids aren't doing well and that we might need to stop and get them some help. And basically, they're the opposite of the things that I've just told you before. So if our children all of a sudden aren't sleeping, that they were sleeping well and now they're waking through the night, that might be a red flag that something's happened. Yeah, or if their eating's changed in some way, either they've stopped eating or they're eating way more than we would be expecting them to be eating. Obviously, sadness would be a big red flag if our kids are looking quite down a lot of the time, or they're starting to withdraw, they're not enjoying the things that they've previously enjoyed doing, they're not wanting to do much of anything. That would certainly be something that we might get concerned about. School issues when our children get to school age, that's often a big one as well that we need to be thinking about. And so school issues might come up in terms of certainly learning and academic problems, but also the social problems that sometimes come with school. Obviously physical symptoms, so children complaining of headaches and stomach aches and different aches and pains in their body might be a sign, a big red flag. It might be a medical sign, but equally it might be an emotional sign that something's not quite right for them. Difficulties in concentrating might be one, or also changes in behaviour and just doing things a little bit differently to what we've seen before. So as a psychologist, when I start thinking about mental health difficulties in children and what might be going on, we've got these three main areas here. So biologically, some of us are going to be prone to having more mental health issues than others because it's in our family. So if we've got a history of family members who've had depression, who've had ADHD or other mental health issues, then there is a higher chance that our children might also be experiencing some of those difficulties. On the social side, there could be things within their friendship groups, within school settings, but also within the family that could be occurring that can cause a mental health issue. And then on the psychological side, we've obviously got self-esteem, our actual coping skills, so how good can our kids cope when a difficulty comes their way? What are their social skills like? Some kids are just naturally really good at being able to make friends. Some kids aren't. And some need to be explicitly taught that skill. So it's not that they won't eventually do it, but it doesn't come naturally to them. They haven't just picked it up by the by. So we've got this intersection of different things that could be happening. And these are all the things, if someone comes in my clinic, that I'll start thinking about. So if they are struggling, I'll start pulling this apart to go, well, where might things have been, gone a little bit off course where we need to, pay attention and perhaps give a little bit of intervention. So I want to talk now about some of the common issues that we might see, and certainly that appear for me in my private practice. The biggest one is going to be anxiety. Okay, so almost 7% of kids might experience anxiety. Now, what I'm talking about here isn't just shyness. Lots of kids are shy. They don't like to talk to new people and they'll hide behind your legs and do all of those sorts of things. Here, I'm talking about something a bit more serious. So typically, as a psychologist, if I'm diagnosing someone with an anxiety disorder, it's got to interfere with their everyday life. So it's actually stopping them from doing the everyday things that they would be doing for their age and stage. So that might be a child who's refusing to go to school, for instance, or can't be left alone. So they are stuck to mum's leg, and whether they need to go to, mum needs to go to the bathroom or the shower or anything, that child is there because they just can't seem to have that separation. So certainly you can see how this is interfering a lot more. So we might, there's lots of different types of anxiety that might present as well. And again, these tend to match with our developmental stages. So younger children, it is the separation anxieties or maybe the phobias. As we head into primary school years, social anxiety starts to pick up. And as we head more into adolescence, it's more general anxiety, panic disorders and those sorts of things. So we'd be certainly looking for those for anxiety disorders. Just going to see if I was going to mention anything else about that. This is a really important thing about anxiety that some people find quite confusing. I think naturally people will assume that anxious kids are the quiet kids that are a little mouse that hide away in the corner. Some anxious kids are really loud and their anxiety bursts out of them, okay? But it's still anxiety. So be aware of that it might surprise you, but sometimes this comes back to our fight and flight system. So most anxious people will use the flight option. They're going to run away and hide from the thing that's making them anxious. But some of us will fight, and it will be externalised when that anxiety comes out. So we're certainly looking for that potential. Anxiety as well often co-occurs with lots of other conditions. It's the one that we might see on the outside, but it might be a symptom of something else. So ADHD and autism are good examples of this, that anxiety usually goes hand in hand with these conditions due to some of the differences in their brain and the way it's experiencing the world, which is actually what we're going to talk about next. So the next common condition that I assist families with is ADHD. So statistics suggest around 7% of kids as well. ADHD comes in a few different forms. So we can have some kids who are very inattentive, so they get distracted easily, they forget things, they're not really good at being organised and staying on task. People, when they hear ADHD, typically think the other side, which is the hyperactivity side. So these are the kids that seem like they're driven by a motor, they bounce off the walls, can't sit still, that sort of thing. But we then also have a combined type, so you can be both the inattentive and the hyperactive type. So as you can imagine, that creates lots of challenges for young people who have ADHD because our school system, for instance, is not built for someone who is having those struggles. And, often it, what would be the worst word for it? I think often it's not picked up, and it's just assumed that the child is being lazy or that they are deliberately not wanting to do what they're told. So they're naughty, maybe, or bad. Might be a way that they get labelled as well. But actually, it's not these children's fault. They're actually genuinely struggling to do what's expected of them. And their brain is not capable of doing it the way that it might be expected, particularly within a school setting, I would say. Schools are designed for neurotypical children who can pay attention and they can sit at a desk for an hour at a time and all of those bits and pieces, and these kids can't do that in the way that it's designed. Doesn't mean that we can't find ways to make that happen, but in those typical settings, it's not going to happen in that way. Autism, 1% of the population is likely to be autistic. So what we're looking at here are children who have social differences. So they will struggle with social communication. So they might not understand small talk. They might not understand the social rules that we have, like when you walk in a room, you say hello to people. They are likely to have more peer relationship difficulties, so have difficulty making or maintaining friendships, or just not be interested in them at all. And they also are likely to have what we call restrictive and repetitive behaviours. So these are actions that they may do over and over again. So they might have certain rituals or routines they need to follow every day. They might have sensory differences, so really struggle with certain smells or certain loud noises. They might seek out other sensations and really like the feeling of soft things or slimy stuff on their hands and constantly need that. So they're likely to just have different needs from other kids their age. So again, that's likely to create challenges, perhaps within school settings, within home settings. That means that we need to put supports and accommodations in place to allow them to thrive as well. The next one I see is behavioural challenges. Now, ODD is oppositional defiant disorder. I really dislike the name of that one, and conduct disorder even more so. These are not things that I diagnose on a daily basis. They are pretty extreme forms of behavioural difficulties. Yes, we'll see behavioural challenges at our practice, but not usually to this level. As I've got up there on the slide, they do overlap with ADHD and autism. But most likely these behavioural challenges are happening because of some of those other things that I've just described. So there's anxiety in place, but it looks like bad behaviour because no one's addressed the anxiety. Or you've got a child with sensory differences who can't stand the noise in the room, and so all of a sudden they start throwing chairs around, and it's just thought that they've been naughty and they're throwing chairs because they don't want to be there. But actually, it's just so overwhelming in their own mind because of the noise that they're experiencing, but they don't have the social communication skills to say, it's too noisy here, I need to leave. So typically, this is why I don't tend to diagnose these conditions, is because usually there's something else underlying it that I will go looking for first. These don't tend to happen by themselves. They can rarely, and if they do, these people are probably on a very different track in life. And then depression and self-harm. So I probably more likely see this in teenage clients. So maybe up to 3% of child and adolescent population. And it's suggested that maybe 1 in 10 teenagers are self-harming themselves in some way, okay? So when we're talking depression, we're talking about people that are struggling with low mood, low energy. They're likely to be having sleep difficulties. Their eating patterns may have changed. They're no longer getting kind of pleasure within their everyday lives anymore, and everything is just too much and too hard, okay? So we certainly, as sad as it is, we do see this in young people as well pop up from time to time. So now that I've told you about some of the things that we see, let's talk about what we can do to help our kids thrive and potentially to avoid some of those difficulties. And for this, the first thing that we can do is we can provide a really secure base for our children, and what we call good enough parenting. So something really important that I want you to think about here, and I'm sure you're all here today because you want to be good parents, and that's very understandable. But sometimes we as parents can put too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect parents, and there is a difference here, okay? And it's why we call it good enough parenting, but I'll come back to that in a moment. So what I'm going to do is play a little video for you now and get you to get a bit of a background to what we call a circle of security, and it's a good way to understand what our children's needs are in any moment, and also to know what we as parents can do to best support them. And then after the video we'll talk through that, okay?
Parents, we all wonder if we're getting it right. We want to know we're meeting our children's needs, helping them grow, and giving them all that we can. We try to combine our own experience of being parented with the advice of others and our own instincts and beliefs about what is best. And still, we so often worry that we're not succeeding. In a world that is always offering the next best parenting solution, the circle of security is based on decades of attachment research. Unlike many behavioral perspectives, it offers relationship tools to provide a new way of understanding your children's needs, creating lasting security for them and more satisfaction for you. The circle graphic has been created to help you know what to look for, so you can read your children's behavior to guide you in meeting their needs. It's really not complicated. People of all ages have attachment needs. These needs can be divided in 3 ways. Let's look at this child. First, he needs to know the freedom and confidence to go out and explore his world. Second, he needs to feel assured that whenever he's ready, he can come back for comfort and protection. Third, he needs his caregiver to be in charge in a kind way. 3 basic needs that can be thought of as going out on the circle, coming in on the circle, and hands on the circle. Let's have a look in more detail. Feeling safe and supported, our children want to discover their world. When going out, they need to know that their exploration is encouraged, that we're right there watching over them, delighting in them, offering help when needed, and ready to enjoy their new adventures with them. And when they're coming in, they need us to refill their emotional cup. This means organizing their emotions and letting them know we are delighted to welcome them back, protect, comfort, and understand them. The key for us as parents is to remain strong and kind while knowing when to encourage their going out into the world and how to be available to welcome them back to us. It's crucial that we learn to identify our children's needs like this, because misreading them, or worse, missing them altogether, can cause pain and frustration. We all know how uncomfortable it can be to be held too close when we want to be out exploring, or kept at a distance when we need emotional support, or simply to be without someone who is bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, who we can trust to understand what we need when we're feeling lost, confused, or out of control. When a child misbehaves, the cause is often rooted in how safe and secure they're feeling. So it's not surprising that they behave well when a parent learns to tune into their child's needs on the circle in this way. And because our needs on the circle never disappear, learning to read cues can help you better understand and meet the needs of people of all ages, including your own. So that's all there is to it. Just know that at any given moment, your child is somewhere on the circle asking you to meet a need. Support my going out. Welcome my coming in. Be the hands that keep me safe by staying in charge and committed to helping me feel connected. And please remember this, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. At Circle of Security, we've come to realize that good enough is, well, good enough. All of us are going to miss needs on the circle time and again. Welcome to the club. But if we meet our children's needs enough of the time, the results will be happier, healthier, more secure children, and parents too.
So I think a bit like what Shirley was saying before, a lot of these things haven't changed in many, many years. So this model circle of security has definitely been around 20 plus years that I've been a psychologist. So it's not new things, but it's always helpful to have those reminders of, what it is that, we should be doing as parents. And keeping in mind, whilst this visual has small children up there, that actually our attachment needs are there throughout our entire life. So even as adults, we travel around this circle every day in our relationships with the people that we, care about and love. So it just changes, and the circle, I guess, gets bigger and wider the older we get. So our little ones need this to be a very small circle, but as we get older, that circle gets bigger and bigger. But the needs that we have on the circle don't actually change. So as parents, what we need to do as our children go out and explore the world is that we just need to watch over and delight in them and let them know that we think it's wonderful that they're out there exploring the world. When they come back in, often what I see parents do really well is the protection. So if our child falls over and hurts their knee, we can do let me put a Band-Aid on that and make you feel better. But what we sometimes miss is the organise my feelings. And this is a common reason that people will land in my clinic, is they haven't as parents maybe even been taught well themselves how to organise their own feelings, and therefore they struggle to organise their children's feelings. It's really common with children, when they fall over, for instance, to say something like, "It's okay, big boys don't cry, off you go." And sometimes that is the thing that we need to say, particularly if it is something very minor. But sometimes we just need to take that moment to go, "Oh, you got scared when you fell over. It's actually not about the pain that you've hurt your knee, but you were feeling scared when that happened." And just labelling that and validating that emotion is what the child needs in the moment, potentially more than the Band-Aid on the knee. So we need to be thinking about that and organising our children's feelings when they're coming back in, just as much as we might provide that comfort and protection. It's the description and validation of feelings that also is really, really important. They spoke about being a good enough parent as well. And interestingly, the research that they've done in this area says that if we get that circle right 20% of the time, then we've been a good enough parent, which is a very, very low number. And hopefully a lot of us will exceed it. But this is what you need, or almost everything you need to know about parenting. So always be bigger, stronger, wiser and kind. Whenever possible, follow your child's lead, but when necessary, take charge. So if you want to understand that a bit better, that book that I've got up there, Raising a Secure Child, is an excellent recommendation written by the founders of this Circle of Security program. And it really will break down in a lot more detail what that's all about, okay? But what I would encourage you to just take away from today is thinking about, where are my children on the circle right now, and what are their needs? And if you think about those things, chances are then you're going to meet that need and give them what they need to be that emotionally strong child in that moment. Which is my next point there about emotional support and validation. As I said, a lot of children land in my clinic, and beyond the basic emotions of happy and sad and angry and scared, they haven't learned those other words that might explain emotions. So anger, for instance, can't just be anger. It goes from mildly upset or frustrated through to enraged at the other end. And there's differences in the way that feels in our body and what we might need to do to regulate that. So part of our circle of security, particularly when our children are smaller, is about how we're what we call co-regulating. So we're being that container around our children's feelings, but we're also modelling for them how to do it in any given moment. So, it's providing that support and validation, but not overdoing it as well. So these things that equally always need to be kept in balance, and I want you to keep that in mind, that we're not overprotecting our children, because then they wouldn't be going out on the top of the circle, because we'd be keeping them in all the time because it's not safe otherwise. But it's when they've been out and they come back in of their own accord that we provide that opportunity to organise and help validate how they're feeling. Often what we do as parents as well, we're usually very good problem solvers, and we just want to jump in and fix it. Right? We don't want our children upset. We don't want them struggling. And so it's like, how can I fix that immediately? Yeah, oh, that child pushed you over in the playground. Right, let's go and tell them off and yell at them. Of course, that's natural. We want to be that protector of our children, but we also have to, in those moments, pause and just help them make sense of it. Help them understand how they might be feeling before we jump into problem solving mode, before we jump into teacher mode and want to do something. Let's just first name that emotion. Yeah, we're often, a strategy that we often teach is about naming it to tame it. So if you've got a child who regularly gets really, really angry, if they don't know that they're feeling angry, if they don't know that when they get angry, their fists are going to bunch up and their eyebrows are going to furrow and all of those things. If they're not reading that and going, oh, this is a feeling of anger, then they're not going to be able to do that next step and actually calm themselves back down from that. So these are the skills and the strategies that we can be working on to help them through those sorts of moments. The next thing we need to do is set clear boundaries for our children. So again, when I see people land in our clinic, it can often be because either boundaries haven't been set, so we're just letting kids do whatever they want, or we've gone to the other extreme, that we've been too strict and we've had too many boundaries. And usually that means the children aren't getting to go out on that top part of the circle and explore. So being really clear on what's expected, what's unexpected, what can happen and can't happen is also going to help our children to be feel a lot more secure, and therefore to be a lot more emotionally strong. The next thing we can do with our kids is actually to teach them coping skills. And again, to model them to our children. So if I'm driving along the freeway and I'm feeling really frustrated because the car in front of me just cut me off, and the kids are in the back seat, then I can say that out loud. Oh, I'm feeling really frustrated right now because that car just cut me off. I really have the urge to honk my horn at them, but I'm going to take 5 breaths and say to myself, it's okay, I'm still going to get where I'm going, and we'll keep moving on with our day. Now, I would have done that internally anyway in that moment, but my kids don't know that sitting in the back of the car, and therefore, how are they going to learn to do something like that if I'm not actually modelling that and teaching it to them? So all of these incidental moments that we have in our day can be opportunities to be teaching our kids these skills. So emotion regulation is one coping skill that we might look at. Others might be how to relax in a moment, how to approach rather than avoid. So if we've got an anxious child, again, they're probably not going to want to go and do that thing that's making them feel anxious, so that we can actually teach them how to stay calm and have that opportunity. That would also be another really good one that we could do. Mostly, as my image up there suggests, it's about how we teach our kids to bounce back. Because often when we have a difficulty, it will be that avoidance that kicks in, and the more we avoid things, the harder they get. Play is another really important thing that sometimes we forget about, that play is the work of children, and we need to give them lots of opportunities for play. But some of our kids will struggle with play. So our autistic kids, for instance, might struggle with that. Our ADHD kids might struggle with play, and they might actually need some supports. They might need to work with an occupational therapist or a speech therapist or a psychologist to learn some of those play skills so that they can come out and go and interact. We might assume that every kid knows how to play, but some don't, okay? The other really important point about play, I think from an emotional health perspective, is that we've got to allow time for play. And in our busy lives, sometimes that's not happening either, that there's lots of structured activities to do, and they can be important, but we also need unstructured play. Children need time to be bored and just learn how to play and naturally find an empty cardboard box and imagine it into something else or whatever it might be. And I think that's really a big one that's missing at the moment for lots of our kids, that I would really, really encourage opportunities for. Social interactions is another one, which again, we might think, like my kid goes to school and they go to choir practice and they do this and that. They're always interacting socially, but sometimes it's that unstructured social time that's really important. The other one, picking up on the screen use and the gaming and things, is that social interactions are looking a little bit different these days. I know my 17-year-old son spends a lot of his time interacting socially, but it's via gaming. So all of his mates are there. There's, 6 or 7 of them, and they're all chatting. But it's very different to if we're actually in a room with people and knowing how to have the skills of going up to someone and talking to them and having those things. And as human beings, we are wired for social connection. And so I certainly do worry a little bit for our future generations who may be losing some really essential social skills, I think. So we will see where that lands, but wherever possible, encouraging them off the devices and out into the world to interact with actual people would be fantastic. Cognitive development is another one just to mention, so making sure that our children have those opportunities. Obviously, this is partly what schools are designed to do, but some of our kids are going to struggle a little bit more in these areas and again might need a little bit more assistance, so just to be aware of that one. And all the healthy living things, so getting adequate sleep, getting adequate nutrition, getting out in the sunshine. All of those things are good for our mental health as much as they are good for our physical health. So also things that we can be doing as parents to help our kids be emotionally healthy. So just coming back to those opposites of the things that we might see happening if our kids are not doing so well. So we might be dismissing their feelings, invalidating them, comparing our kids with others too much, overprotecting them, not giving them those opportunities. And I totally get, as a parent, that's scary. My 17-year-old who has started driving this year, that was a horrifying moment for me as a parent. So I was like, no, I don't want you going out, when he actually got his licence and I wasn't in the car anymore to make sure that he was driving well. So it's, again, natural in there that we just want to do that protection, but if we're doing it too much, it can cause problems. There can be a thing that we'll try and do everything for our kids, again, because we just want things to be easy for them, but then they're not getting those opportunities to learn and to grow. Sometimes as parents we can be inconsistent, totally understandable as well, but that can also then contribute to difficulties we might see because our kids might not be making sense of that. We might have too high of an expectation of our kids. We'll often see this with kids who might have autism, ADHD, things like that, that we're going, oh, well, you're 8, so you should be doing what all the other 8-year-olds are doing. But their brain may not be there. Their brain might be operating at a 6-year-old level, and that's okay. Let's find some accommodations around that. So we've got to make sure that the expectations that we pitch to our kids are at the level for them, not just for their age and certainly not for beyond where they're at. And then the last one is us not being present as parents, which can also be a problem. Coming back to the use of social media and digital devices, something that I would add to your list is parents and what they're modelling around that if I'm sitting here on my phone and my kids are there, what am I actually teaching them? Yeah, and even though I might be physically present, I'm actually not. So just our presence often as parents is the most powerful thing that we can actually give our kids. So when might you need to seek help? Well, I think that probably gives you a few ideas from the things that we've spoken about so far. The more important thing that I often see is that parents will delay seeking help, mostly because sometimes there's the thoughts of, oh, they'll just grow out of it. It's just a phase they're going through, might be part of it. Sometimes there's stigma attached to it, People will think that my child's crazy if I have to go and get them some help. Or people will think I'm a really bad parent if I have to go and ask for help because I don't know what to do when my child's refusing to go to school or they're smashing up their bedroom every night or whatever it might be that's going on, okay? It doesn't even necessarily mean that anything's wrong and that they're going to end up with one of those diagnoses I was talking about before, but if there are things happening for your child and within your family that are making life difficult, I would just really encourage you to seek help early, because the earlier you do it, chances are the bigger difference it will make the problem will be less entrenched and you can get back on course. And I think that's a really important thing to be remembering. So where might you get help? All of those ones that were suggested earlier are certainly ones that I would recommend as well. Often your GP is a good starting point to know where all of those places are that we can get help. School teachers as well often are very good resources to be thinking about. And beyond that, in terms of practices like my own, being aware that there are mental health care plans, so you can get some financial support through Medicare if you are needing to come and see a psychologist. So there's opportunities like that as well. And then a final note that I have got to parents is, please remember to put on your own oxygen mask first, as they say when you hop on the plane, because if you're not doing well, then your kids can't do well either. And I think that is the most important thing. It's the thing that you have to give your children more than anything else is yourself. And so you need to be functioning and doing well if you're going to help them to do well. That's just a little bit more information if anyone is interested as well of some of the things that we've spoken about. But yeah, thank you very much for having me come and talk to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. Our next speaker is actually Carolina, or I know her as Lina, and she is actually a mom of 2 boys, and my youngest boy goes to the same class as Lina's youngest boy as well, and they both go to Rehoboth. And Lina is actually a lawyer, isn't it? Yes, and she is currently working as a legal advisor, but she's very passionate about children, and because she has the first-hand experience with her own kids. And so Lina will share her experience of having difficulties as a mom, how she managed to handle that difficulties and provide the best care for her kids. And also, now she is very passionate about it. She's an advocate for children. She keeps telling me she's an advocate for children, and she wants the children to be the voice of children. Okay, so before we, we'll just get Lina on the stage. So we will have question answer at the end, okay?
So I'm not a medical expert, okay, like these 2 previous to me. So expectations-wise, let's have a different expectation of me, I hope. I'm just gonna put my notes here so that I don't forget. But I think a lot of the things that have been spoken about is really, everything you need to know, I guess, in terms of parenting. So let's start with who am I? Shirley introduced a little bit. And why am I here? So I'm mother to 2 boys, as Shirley mentioned. The first one is 15 years old now, and the second is almost 8. They're 2 very unique, very different boys. My firstborn, Gabriel, is ADHD, so he's autistic and ADHD. It was diagnosed when he was 6. And the youngest, Zane, who's almost 8, he's just very chatty, very bubbly, very smart. But he was actually, when I was pregnant with him, he was actually suspected of having a very, very high chance of Down syndrome. And every time I went for appointments, I was told to abort him. But Shirley probably can attest to him. He's very smart, and so that's that. And yes, I work as a lawyer at the moment, and I'm really, really passionate about being, the voice for children because of what I've gone through with Gabriel mostly. Our roots are Indonesian, obviously, but just like many of you, we are raising our children without having that village, like that cultural village here, living in Australia. But I think in this space with the church, I can see, it's a really great community here. And why I am here is I'm here to share our journey that my husband and I have gone through, the mistakes that we've made, the miracles that came, and the lessons that we've learned over the last 15 years. And really learning on, because I'm a Christian, so seeing our children the way God sees them, not just as this random person given to you to take care of, the screaming child, but really as the human being themselves and what plans God has for their lives. So I'm not here through the stories, so some things might be a bit hard to hear. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to shame anyone. My husband is here somewhere as well, so it's not to shame him either, but really to share the experiences that we have. So, and also I'm here because my heart breaks every time I see a parent struggling with their children, not knowing what to do, and just sometimes putting their hands up and like, whatever, you do whatever you want to do, I don't care. And then this child then grows up to be a teenager, grows up to be a young adult, like what Kelly shared, and shows up at her clinic. And I was once that young child. I was once that teen. I was once that young adult who struggled, who was really starving for love and starving for my parents' presence, and filling the void with all sorts of wonderful things that I don't recommend any children goes through, but that pushed me towards what I'm doing today here, sharing, agreeing with Shirley to sit here and share my story with you, and what I look to do even wider to share my, my story and my son's story and our family story, so that it gives hope and hopefully build bridges with our next generations and the parents here as well with the next generations. So you're not alone. Hopefully what I shared today through our journey will lift you up and light up your heart. So I won't go through the signs. I actually have notes here on the signs, but I think you've had you've heard a lot of the signs. One thing I want to actually highlight is that, yes, the first 5 years of brain development is the most crucial, but there's hope beyond that, because the human's brain, Dr. Kelly Cassidy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the human brain really still continues to develop even until the late 20s. In reality, the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning part, the decision making, the planning, the impulse control, doesn't actually come to near full development until about 25 to 30, which I was really shocked to. I'm like, oh, that's probably why I struggled all my teens and my adults, young adult years, making all these stupid mistakes and not realize it until after, closer to when I was getting married, which is 27. So that explains why. So I won't go through that. But the biggest thing that I picked up is children don't learn through words. Children learn through seeing what we do, seeing what others do. They learn through, the environment, through us. So parenting really starts with us. Parenting starts with me. Okay, so a bit about me, my childhood. So physically and I guess financially wise, I've had a really wonderful childhood. My parents provided for me really well. We're financially quite okay. When I was 12, I was sent by my parents to study alone in Singapore. I think a lot of Asian children has to go through that as well. But even prior to going to Singapore, I went through a lot of horrible things that I don't want any children to ever have to experience. And I went through that alone because I couldn't tell my parents. And until today, I have not told my parents because I don't feel safe. So that circle of security, I think, is really important, because if children don't feel safe enough to come to their parents when they're in trouble, then that's actually trouble. Because then, you grow up carrying it all along. Then, so 12, I was in Singapore. I had to really grow up very, very fast because I was pretty much alone there, even though I was in a homestay. My parents were still in Indonesia. 17, I came to Australia. And then by 19, I was actually quasi-parent to my 3 siblings. So they were 8, 9, and 8, 11, and 17 years old at that time because of the situation in Indonesia back then in 98. So my parents had no choice but to send all my siblings to Australia. And I had to survive for my siblings, really. And at that time, I wasn't actually complaining, but I really didn't know what to do. So I guess my siblings also went through trauma from my parenting. But through that, I built resilience. I built resilience through survival because I had to grow up really fast. Now looking back though, God really used that season to build in me the resilience that carried me through to my darkest parenting days, my darkest parenting seasons, because I was strong enough, when I was younger, then I could be there for my kids when things got super hard. So the stage of life, so when we had Gabriel, Gabriel was born, he was seemingly just like any other babies. He was smiling when he was 4 weeks old. He was making sounds. He was playing. He was happy. We didn't really think there was anything wrong. But looking back now, there was actually signs. He wasn't a good sleeper, so it was very, very hard to get him to sleep. My husband can attest to this. It's really funny because we rock him to sleep. We try and pat him on the butt while he's sleeping, and then, your hands get tired, and then you put him on the bed, and you pat him again, and he's still not sleeping. The pat becomes smacks on the bottom. Don't report me to child protection. But yes, so we become so frustrated. We don't know what was wrong with him. Why is he not sleeping? And so there was the little signs. He was a difficult sleeper from when he was little, even until now. He takes 2 hours to fall asleep sometimes. And other signs is like he was a very picky eater, so he wouldn't eat anything that's not crunchy, and you have to actually rub the food on the side of his lips before he would open up his mouth. So we didn't know. We just thought, he's just so fussy. He won't eat this. He won't eat that. The big emotional meltdowns, the sudden emotional meltdowns, where we're just happily eating at a restaurant. He's happily eating his food, and suddenly he'll just cry and kick. And we're like, what happened there? And you just can't calm him down, straight away. And whenever he was upset, it will last a whole day. There will always be little bits of, meltdowns throughout the day. Hitting, biting. I think my husband is more of the victim for that. A lot of hitting and a lot of biting. And fixed interest on one thing. So he was really, really good with dinosaurs. He loved dinosaurs so much that before he even spoke, so he didn't start talking until about almost 5 years old, but he knew how to pronounce the name of dinosaurs from A to Z perfectly. I couldn't even, I printed out and I tried to learn from I can't even pronounce it. Up to today, he's 15, he's still obsessed with dinosaurs. So that was, I think, little bits of things that, we didn't realize at the time, but now we look back and like, oh, okay, those are the signs. So how we found out he was autistic, I never knew the term autism or ADHD before then, but someone told my husband, so my husband's brother actually came to him when Gabriel was about 3, and said to my husband that I think you should take Gabe to the doctor because I think he might have Asperger. And then my husband came to me and told me that, and then he just left it with me because I will sort it out apparently. And I researched because I have never heard of it. I researched. I was like, what is this Asperger thing? Googled it. I wish there was ChatGPT back then, but I Googled. RaisingChildren.net was it was really, really good because it came up with a list of symptoms and signs, and I went through it. I was like, oh, Gabriel ticked all the signs. Okay, what do we do next? I didn't know anyone who had experience with autism and ADHD, so I went to my good old GP. So your GP here, like Kelly said, is you're really good, so if you have any concerns. And that's kind of started us off on a journey of, seeing clinical psychologists like Dr. Cassidy here, who helped us a lot. Therapies, OT, speech therapies, everything. So we did everything. And that early intervention really made a huge, huge difference. Gabriel started talking. He can't stop talking. Even today, he will continue talking. But I think, and I knew that parenting would be hard, but I didn't know that it was going to be that hard. I just thought that it was just normal, that children are just difficult. But when Gabriel started going to daycare and school, then we noticed that, why is other children doing different things? So why are other children not like Gabriel? And so that early intervention really helped us to help him with the skills, social skills, with his speech, that today, his motor skills as well. So he had really weak, fine, and gross motor skill, which is common with children with autism and ADHD. But today, he's a black belt in Taekwondo. He is working towards his black belt in mixed martial arts. He is playing drums at church. When he first learned drums, he always complained that his hands hurts and crying, and the drumstick used to fly everywhere because he couldn't hold it tight. But today he's serving God, playing drums at his youth. When Gabe was diagnosed with autism, he was 6. Zane was born a year after. So it was a really challenging time because we were navigating that early diagnosis, what to do. And then I have a baby as well, on my hand. And I learned that 2 children can be very, very different. And the way you parent has to be different, And I'm still learning it today because I still have kind of the repercussions of trying to parent them the same way till today. So, and God likes plot twists. So I thought that my struggles, last 2-3 years, I had really difficult times mentally myself. And I started seeing a counselor, thinking, and I actually contacted Headspace as well as a carer. And I thought, this parenting an autistic child who's depressed, who's suicidal, is just getting on to me. So I went to see a counselor, and it was like, she was asking, so your child's autistic and your child has ADHD. Do you think that, you might have one of this as well? And I'm like, nah, I've done fine. What do you mean? I've done fine. I'm a lawyer. I've studied. I've done this and that and this. And then she looked me in the eye and asked, but how hard was it? And I was like, oh, super hard, very hard. And so she helped me to actually think back, as in, okay, so you survived all this time, but how have you survived? So I was actually diagnosed with, through that process, I was kind of in denial, but I was also seeing it because all the strategies that I learned from the psychologist for Gabriel worked for me as well. I was like, and I could connect with Gabriel really well. I could understand his way of thinking quite well. Whereas when I try and explain to my husband was like, no, he's just pretending. You have to be more firm with him. And I'm like, no, you can't see it. I can see it. And yeah, so I was diagnosed with ADHD just 2 months ago, which actually gives me a lot of relief because I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not finding things hard to do. Is actually because my brain is wired differently, which I used to actually blame myself. I always have this really negative self-esteem. I always have very negative self-talk towards myself. I'll drop a bottle and I'm like, oh, dumb, you're so stupid. Like, not being kind to myself. And now that I have that diagnosis, it is a little bit easier for me to go, no, you're late because you have ADHD. You haven't had your medication, so you need to have it. You can't focus because you have ADHD. Your brain is just different. And so that helps me to be kinder to myself. So seeking help is not a weakness. seeking help is actually strength. Seeking help is actually being strong. No matter how old you are and how old your child is, there is always hope. And I think that's the best thing that we can do as a parent, because our children can't speak for themselves yet, babies. Even as a teenager, my son, now 15, he can't speak for himself yet, but we're working on it to help him advocate for himself. But we as the parent needs to guide him with that circle. I love that circle. I always remember that circle whenever, I'm jumping in too fast, because when you have a special needs child, you just kind of like want to protect them at all costs. But if you protect them too much, then you clip their wings and they can't fly high. And brain differences is not a disease. I'm still fighting my parents with this, because in the Asian culture, I think it's quite common, especially in Indonesia, when you have autism, you have ADHD, you're sick. We need to pray for miracles for you so that you are cured, you're healed. And I believe in miracles. I'm a Christian, I believe in miracles, but brain differences, God creates you different for a purpose. I believe that God has a purpose for everyone. Otherwise, we'll all just be the same, factory made, right? And environment plays a huge part. So Gabriel has the same diagnosis as someone else who's now 21, 22 years old. That person didn't have, so I was, I talked to the parents, and that child doesn't have the early intervention that Gabe has. He was eventually diagnosed with autism only at the age of 19 when he was suicidal. That made a huge difference, because Gabriel had early intervention since he was 6. We go through very, very intensive treatments, therapy sessions at some stages, like 3 times a week, speech therapies and that works. It helps, even with the same diagnosis. The communication abilities, the social connections, it's just worlds apart. And so I encourage, if you know if it's your child, or if you know someone else who's got a child that age, encourage them to get help early. And we're so blessed here in Australia that we have readily available interventions and support. Screen time, I have to go there. Screen time is even more crucial for children with and adults, including myself. Being aware of what screens does to you, even as an adult, I have to be really, as soon as I have my phone in my hand, I have to be really, really aware, okay, how long have I been on this? Because I can easily go down this rabbit hole of, even in the name of research, okay? I do that a lot. Research for my son, this condition, that condition. 3 hours later, my husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, reading. And I will forget, to cook. My children hasn't been fed. And it's very easy to do. So imagine if it's that easy to do, like to us, if it does that to us, imagine what it does to our children. And yes, children with autism and ADHD, they get sucked into that screen, I think the devices even more easily, and it's harder for them to actually let go. So we've had to be really, really intentional about screen times. No screens at all during the week, school days, because there's no chance of getting homework done otherwise. And even on the weekends, we try and limit that. But it doesn't mean that I didn't make the mistake of using iPad was God sent when we struggled with Gabriel. I think we started, even when he was 2, because every time we go to restaurants, both of us, we can't eat because he'll be like, touching everything. He'll be wanting to stand up. He'll be screaming and that, whereas the device actually silenced him. At that time, we thought, oh, this is good. Let's just keep putting, I downloaded heaps and heaps of clips and movies back then just for him to keep him, there. And when I actually learned of his condition and then realized what that was doing to him, I was like mortified, What did I do to my child? So I think there was a question, like after 5 years old, can you still do something? Yes, you can. My son is the proof. We only learned, I think, that devices are not great for them when he was diagnosed about 6. And he's not addicted to devices at this stage, thank goodness. So I want to leave, I actually want to read a verse here, Proverbs 22, verse 6. It says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And this is something that I think has gotten us through till today, that God, that our children belongs to God, and we are never going to be able to parent perfectly, but God is the perfect parent. God is the perfect father. And when this verse says, train up your child, train in what? It's actually training them, teaching them to put God first in everything, to seek God's wisdom, God's will for their talents and their abilities. Not your way, not my way, but God's way. Because what we want sometimes is not what God wants in their life, not what they want for their life. So, on reflection, has anyone ever thought that this parenting stuff is too hard? Anyone? Has anyone ever thought that these kids should just get it together, you know? Just get on with it. I turned out fine. Just toughen up, you know? Get on with it. Who has ever thought that? I hope I'm not alone. We've all done that, right? It's most likely because of our upbringing, because our parents parented us that way, maybe, or the environment, or the time of the years. You know. But we turned out fine on the outside, seemingly. On the inside, if we're completely honest with ourselves, are we fine? Have you ever imagined how much freer, how much more connected, how much more whole you could be if your parents had maybe just become, just be more present with you when you were younger? Not blaming, because we are all trying to do our best, parenting the best way that we know how, parenting the best way that, we have resources through what we know, right? So our parents only know what they know, and we can't blame them for that. But whenever, just think and be honest with yourself sometimes when you're thinking, I'm fine, my children should be fine, just, being raised the way I was. Is that true? Are you actually craving something else that you're not talking about, right? So support is not excuses, it's bridges. They will help children. These children will grow into adults to just not survive, but to actually thrive and to actually make an impact to the world and to the people around them. Because our world's so broken and we need more people to heal it. So, thinking about support, so if you're still not sure, I don't really want to see a psychologist, like what Kelly said, people are going to say my child's crazy, or, I don't want to say that I'm seeing a psychiatrist, a doctor, or have a mental health plan. I was actually told once, don't get a mental health plan. You're never going to get a job if you get a mental health plan. And I believed that for many, many years. That's why I didn't seek counseling and therapy, because I'm like, I want a job. I want to not have a job. But it's not true. If your child needs glasses, will you get them a pair? Or will you just say, just focus your eyes more, squint a little bit more, surely you can see. Come on, you can. Would you do that? No, right? I'm sure you won't. If your child needs insulin for their diabetes, would you get it? Or would you just say, don't eat too much sugar? Don't eat this and try that. You will get them their treatment, right? If your child needs a wheelchair, crutches, would you get it? You will, right? So why does it have to be different if the support that your child needs is with their brain and with their emotional development? I hope you can see that it's not different. And in conclusion, I want to paint this picture in your mind, hopefully, from Psalm 127, verse 3 and 4. Behold, children are heritage and gift from the Lord. The fruit of the womb, a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. That verse, that makes you and I, the parents, warriors. and your child, they are purpose-filled arrows. We will shoot these arrows to places God will take them, to places that we as parents might never ever go ourselves. Maybe after this session today, you'll go home and do some of these things. Hug your child more. Say, I love you, I'm proud of you, multiple times for no reason. Maybe you'll book that assessment and that appointment that you've been avoiding that the teacher has been telling you to do. Maybe you'll get the help that your child needs. Maybe you'll apologize to your child, reset and start again. Maybe you'll set stricter boundaries around their device. But whatever it is, do it with faith, do it with hope, do it with grace. And most importantly, do it with love. We don't need to be perfect, like it has been said so many times. We will never be perfect. There's only one perfect parent, God. We just need to be present. Present bodily, present mentally, opening our heart, opening our mind to see our children for who they are. Our children's future are still being written by the choices we as parents make every day and by the choices they themselves will make one day through us helping them now to give them the skills. So, the last question is, will we help them write the greatest story ever written about themselves? Will we, parents, help make them have a history and a future? That's all. Thank you. I hope that helps. Do you want us to stay up here?
Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to hand this to. Can we give an applause to all our speakers? So, look, now is the question and answer session. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. We do the old-fashioned way. Okay, any questions from you? Anything you want to know more?
There were
Yeah.
lots of questions before. Now everyone's shy.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, and sorry, I forgot your name. Lina. It's probably not a question, but I think one thing that Dr. Kelly, you mentioned before, something that our kids don't learn from us because we just like coping skills. That's like really hit me. We always kind of like, okay, when you're driving and all this cut you off, you just keep it to yourself. I'm like, okay, do this. That is really important. I think like to say it out loud for them to actually learn. It's like, because they don't really see us doing it. They just like, oh, okay, they're like, you know, they're calming themselves. But how? That is something that's like, okay, maybe this is something that we need to do more. Say it out loud in front of your kids. This is how you cope. Or, okay, this is probably a daily thing. They keep like, you know, fighting, of course, on and off. And instead of like trying to sort it out themselves, they always just like, I'm going to tell mom, I'm going to tell dad. It's like, no, you need to learn how to, that's, okay, maybe it's a question. How do you kind of tell them? You need to work, well, this is what I say, and like, you need to work it out between yourself, but how do we tell them on how to work it out between themselves? To kind of like, hey, because they don't really kind of listen to each other. They just like, you did this, you started this, blah, 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 but they don't really calm down, talk, and let's sort it out. How do we get them to do that?
I would say you still need to be there as the guide. So if they haven't got the capacity, then you're going to walk them through the steps. So if the first step is that they're still very elevated, hey, let's all just stop and take some breaths together, or whatever it is that you know works to regulate in that moment. And then we can use a collaborative problem-solving approach. You know, what do you think would solve this problem that we're fighting over right here? What do you think? And then we're actually going through that process rather than you just looking at the situation and going, oh, well, that's his toy, therefore, right? And that we usually will just give the answer. So it's just walking them through each of the steps that you would naturally do, I think, is the way that we do it. And if they struggle with it in the moment to know what the answer is, I often suggest to parents that we offer a menu. You know, do you think we should do this or this or this? Which one do you think would be the best one to do in this situation? Rather than, again, just telling them. So it's an ask, don't tell strategy is what I often suggest to parents. Yeah, and if you keep that in mind, I'm always going to ask a question rather than telling you what to do, then we're teaching in those moments. Yeah.
Hello. I love everything that you guys have shared is absolutely wonderful, and I think we can't have enough of these type of conversations with parents today. My question is around styles of parenting, and of course, in any family, you are two adults coming together from completely different cultures, completely different backgrounds, completely different traumas, completely different healing stages, and I think sometimes I personally find that very difficult to deal with when we're trying to do the right thing, and maybe obviously one parent is very different styles, very different background, and say where we put in boundaries, we've put in everything correctly, but if the other party is undoing all your work in real time, how do we navigate that? And what are some perhaps tips or hacks or maybe interventions? What is the right thing to do in situations like that? Thanks.
Do either of you want to answer that? No? It's something that I spend a lot of time with parents on, is being on the same page for parenting, because you're exactly right. Those differences can make a big difference sometimes. And I would start with by having conversations as parents. How do we, as a team, want to parent our children? Why are we choosing to do it in that way? And is that, I think you, Lena, raised a really important point, is this right for this child? Because how we parent one child might be very different to how we parent our other child, and we've got to be able to adapt to that as well. So that's where I would start, and if you're struggling as a team to decide what that is, then it might be about seeking some external help to decide on that, and speaking, whether that's with other parents or other people in your community, or it is speaking to someone like myself as a psychologist. Sometimes parents need to do that. Some parents can't see the struggles. I think you, Lena, you also raised that. So sometimes it's also about understanding the child you're trying to parent first, and what their differences or their ways of seeing the world might be, before you can even decide on what the parenting strategy should be for that child. Does that help? Yeah.
If I can add a little bit, I guess because my experience as well, especially with parenting, Gabriel, who's autistic and ADHD, but I think it also applies to the other child. With my husband and I think it's good when one of the parties who's struggling, the party who's struggling, is aware that they're struggling with parenting. And this is not to put down my husband. He's a wonderful father. He wants to be a wonderful father, but he knows that he's lacking the skills, or maybe his upbringing is just hindering him from being able to, not yell at the children, or trying to understand that, because like with Gabriel, for example, because I connect with him more, then I kind of take that role, and actively actually just we both agree, we have conversations, which like Kelly mentioned, and we agree that, okay, since, you're still struggling, why don't you leave the kids bit to me, because I'm a bit more patient with the children rather than, having the children wounded by, yelling and being judged and all that. Let's try and, divide and conquer in a way. But I think also learning, so I left the research, so my husband will attest to this. I forward him a lot of videos, parenting videos, parenting articles, everything. When after the psychologist visits, for example, whatever the psychologist is teaching me, I'll be, here's the link. I don't know if he reads it or not, but I just continuously over the years just bombard him with whatever we're working on. Slowly, I think, slowly, it sinks in. But I think having a third party coming in, like, psychologists, if they're willing to help with parenting, I guess looking into ourselves first as well, parents, what is it that we're not agreeing on? And how can we overcome it? Like, what's the root of what we're not agreeing on? And then looking at the child, obviously, because sometimes, the struggle is like, it works with this child. Why is this child not listening, Why is this child just keep fighting when the other one is very, obeys easily, for example, But I hope that helps.
Sorry, I'll just add a little bit. Personally, that question, I actually have an experience with that. Don't think that I'm great, because I'm a doctor, but it's not. And I do struggle with looking after our kids. And another thing that helps is actually seeking help, even advice from somebody who has older kids. And so I'll just share an experience. We had, my husband and I, we had our differences in managing our kids, and it did lead to sort of like us quarreling in the end, and we know that this is not healthy because both he and I have very different way of parenting, and in the end, we actually ask help from our pastors. And even though they don't exactly tell you what to do, you need to do this, but what they did was they pointed out that, and opened our eyes just by chatting, and said, oh, our kids are actually very different. And the way we deal with things has to be different. And our personality is very different because of the way we are brought up. So even just talking, and that sort of enlightened me. And I learned from that, that I need to also sometimes take a step back. So and I learned to, in the family, I'm the one who is more relaxed. My husband is the one who is more, disciplined and more uptight about things. But I'm the one who's like, oh, it's okay, don't worry, everything will fall into place. I'm the one who's more like that. And I learned from that talk that, okay, hang on, I need to sort of listen to him. So he's the head of the family, so I also need to sort of put in effort and a bit more discipline. So talking to somebody who has gone through the experience is good.
I just remembered something. Most importantly, talk to your children. Listen to your children. We are parenting our children. We're not parenting us, right? Sometimes we are, but listen to your children. Actually talk to your children as a couple, together with your child, saying, okay, we noticed this behavior, so we noticed this. Can you tell us, are you struggling with something? Is there something that you want to tell mommy and daddy that is bothering you? But be ready to accept what they say, especially when they're teenagers. So with my son, I got scolded by my psychologist once. My son's psychologist, like, you need to listen to him, Lena. Don't lecture him all the time. And I was like, why? You probably get this there's a lot from parents, Kelly. And so she just set a challenge for me. Go home, talk to your son, and let him know that if you're interrupting him when he still has things to say, let him come up with a code word that he can say, and you have to shut up. I was like, I don't like that. So because it's a challenge, I had to ask my son. He was, I think, 13 at that time. I said, okay, so your psychologist told us to do this. Do I not listen to you? And he looked at me and go, no. Like, really? I was disappointed. And so he came out with a code word. He chose newsflash for some reason. And I did not realize how often I don't listen to him and how often I cut him off in the middle of sentences when he's telling me things, because I'm like, oh, hang on a second. Especially, with social skills and that, when he says something where I'm like, no, that's not appropriate. You don't say that to your friends. And I'll straight away say, no, don't say that. And I'll start teaching him. Then he started actually using it. The first week, I was a bit shocked and a bit put off, because the number of times he's like, newsflash, newsflash. He keeps saying newsflash whenever I'm talking. The first time he actually says newsflash, I was like, huh, what? He says, newsflash, Mama, you need to zip it. And I was like, okay, what do you want to say? And he talked and talked. And inside me, the urge of actually wanting to, like, when are you going to finish? I want to say something. I don't like what you're saying, and I want to correct you, It just, now we've done it for a couple of years. And he actually stopped using the word after a while, because I was more conscious in listening to him. Now he started again, so that means I'm talking a lot again. The last few weeks he's used it a lot. But I think that could be a strategy that you can apply, even with the younger kids. Sometimes we think they don't understand, but they actually understand and know a lot more than we think, than we give them credit for. So, yeah, listening and connecting with your children.
Maybe just to add another resource onto that, it ties in very beautifully with an approach that's out there by Dr. Ross Green. Have you come across that? Yeah. Which is called Collaborative Proactive Solutions. And it is all about how we will collaboratively work with our children to solve things. Because often as adults we will decide what we think the problem is and what we think the solution is, and we might be way off, and then it doesn't work. So if you're interested, he's got some great resources on his website, some free videos of how even to just do the process and get that started. But I think it ties in really nicely with what you're saying there. Yeah. Collaborative Proactive Solutions, or CPS.
I just want to say thank you so much for this amazing workshop. It's really beautiful. So my question goes to you about the single parented, like the single parents, especially for the kids who are struggling, and like the child can be with the parent, then the other time can be with the other parent. So how do you address that issue? Like, he's doing this, the right thing, and with the other parent, he says, don't do this. So how do you address that issue? Where the parents are not the same, like they're not living together, in that situation. So how do you address that?
The ideal answer to that is to find a way to co-parent, even though you're not on the same page. So there are some lovely resources out there. One is called Mums and Dads Forever, which I think is done by Centrecare or Relationships Australia. I cannot remember off the top of my head, but often parents going through a program like that can be really helpful, or doing a program like, I'm trying to think of the name of it, my colleague Tiffany Rochester has a wonderful program for co-parenting that is out there at the moment. But ideally, if it's possible, and I know it's not always, I'm certainly talking in an ideal world here, finding a way to co-parent so that you are still on the same page, even though you might have two different houses operating, would be the best way. Failing that, which I know it's not always possible, it really is just about making it about what happens in your home and continuing to do all of the things that we've spoken about, knowing that at least part of the time your child is getting the things that need to happen, and helping your child to accept that there will be differences between those two homes.
Yeah, if I can add to that as well, I think it depends on how old the child is as well. I mean, the younger ones probably a little bit harder than when they're a bit older. But I think equipping and empowering your child, like what Kelly said, when the child is actually with you, helping them understand, when you're telling them to do something, or when you say no or yes to something, why are you saying yes and why are you saying no, the reason behind it. That's something that I do a lot with Gabriel, really intentionally, because he doesn't understand. When you say, you can't have that chocolate, he doesn't understand why he doesn't have that chocolate. He can't have that chocolate. So I have to really, I know it sometimes, I feel like, this is a bit dumb. Do I really have to explain why you can't eat chocolate? But children like him doesn't actually understand, like they don't pick up on things. You really have to literally spell it out to him, which is actually a good habit, I think, because that stop you from assuming that they know something when they might not. So I do this with my second child as well. So every decisions we try and equip the child to be able to make that decision by themselves, by understanding why. Why is that the right decision? Why is that the wrong decision? And it's not easy. Sometimes it takes repetition, repeating. But I think if you persist, the child will be open to it and understand eventually, hopefully, yeah.
Thank you. I have a question with the anger management. I'm pretty sure every parent, come across with this anger management, because my parents, my dad was a military, so I was brought up in a sort of military way. So that happens. So how to deal with anger management on children, and if there is any boundaries, what are the level of anger we should apply to kids, or not at all? Because I want to treat my son with loving and kindness way, but sometimes my personality was brought up in a military way, from my dad. So if Dr. Kelly can answer, please, thank you.
Yeah. I can certainly appreciate and attest that I also get angry at my kids sometimes, and that is perfectly normal and okay, right? If we come back to good enough parenting, it's trying to get it right most of the time. If we are trying to change children's behaviour and get them to do something different and consistently do it differently, then we need to do what we call attachment neutral. And that means zero emotion, okay? Our attachment-rich things are full of emotion. So the things that we give our emotion to as parents are the things that our children will pay attention to. So you may be, by getting angry at your kids, reinforcing the things that they're doing wrong rather than teaching them to stop doing that thing. Yeah, that's what that actually means. So it backfires on us in that way. So if you can, when you're putting consequences in place, and so it doesn't mean don't put consequences in place when they do the wrong thing, but do it with zero emotion. And so if you need to go and give yourself a timeout to regulate yourself before you come back and put that consequence in place, then do that. And I'll guarantee you that you'll get changes in their behaviour quicker than if you keep yelling at them, getting angry at them for doing the wrong thing.
if I can add a bit, because I go through it every day with my husband, my darling husband. He also struggles with anger issues. I think knowing where, aside from your upbringing with your dad, also knowing where that anger comes from, very often is from fear, that underlying fear that if I don't teach my child this, he's going to be like ABC, things that you don't want him to be in the future. Or you might think, if I don't teach him this, then he might, I don't know, end up in jail or whatever it is. But I think, pausing is a big thing. Doing tag team with your spouse, if your spouse is the more patient one, whenever something triggers you, like knowing, because children are mirrors, right? They're bad mirrors. They're very, very good mirrors, but it's bad for you in a way sometimes because you have to deal with yourself. So knowing that anger actually doesn't come from your child, not what your child actually does at that time, but what your childhood, what happens in your childhood that your child is triggering at that time, if that makes sense. So being able to actually spend time with yourself, I think is really important. Like, my husband still doesn't do this, but I keep telling him, try and think back, try and process, whenever your child's making you really angry, say, not wanting to wake up in the morning to go to school, and we're all rushing. Why? Taking the perspective of that child, first of all, he's tired, he's sleepy, he's gonna be slow. So what can we do? Can we make it, a bit earlier tomorrow? Wake up a bit earlier so everything can be a bit smoother. We can allow him to have that lazy time. And then second is, why are you angry when your child don't listen to you? Think back to your childhood. I think, every time something triggers you, make you really angry and you really want to yell at the child, take the time to think back. Why am I this angry? Do I have to be this angry? So a lot of it is from our upbringing, but it's inside us, and we can, with God's help, we can change. Because I used to be parented. I was telling my husband the other day, I used to be called, the zoo, the animals of the zoo kind of name by my parents, yelled at all the time. But that actually triggered in me something that I don't want my children ever to go through. So it doesn't mean that I don't yell at my kids. I do a lot in the past, but it's much, much less now because being aware of why I'm angry, when I'll be angry, when I'm tired and that. I actually tell my kids nowadays, Mommy is very tired. I don't have the capacity anymore. If you're all going to fight, go and fight yourself. I'm going to be in this room. So they know that, if they do something, then Mommy will just explode. So I hope that helps. Sorry? I wouldn't call it complacency. Probably more taking time for yourself, reflecting. So boundaries will still be there. I don't let my kids get away with. So I pick my battles. So picking your battles is really important. This my wonderful psychologist taught me that. So it's like they're really, really, great support if you need to. But picking your battles, what really matters versus what you can let go. So for example, my kid doesn't want to eat his veggies. My kid don't finish his lunches, which is what the things that sets off my husband. Does it really matter? Yes, it's important. He's not eating his lunches, he'll get sick. It's a waste of food, a waste of money. But is it really worth you getting super angry at him to actually get him to eat his food? Versus he plays with fire, for example, and you don't want him to burn himself. Sometimes if it's not too dangerous, I actually let them get injured a little bit, because that's how they learn. But that's, I guess, the type of battles that you pick. What really matters versus what you can actually let go, and let them learn the consequences. So the boundaries still stay. You don't weaken the boundaries as such, but which one is more important? Does that make sense? Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Just the last question. Okay, before we close.
Dr. Kelly, you mentioned that putting your own oxygen mask first. Someone showed me the iceberg picture that the 10% and 9% of the unconscious. My question is that true that 90% of our action are driven by the unconscious? And our past experience and trauma basically shapes who we are, but how do we navigate parenting through it? The strategies and basically the anger and everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the iceberg analogy is a good one in terms of what we can see and what we can't see. And so to answer your question, it's about, well, how can we see more of what is under the surface? Whether the percentages are right, I don't know. I don't think we have a true way of measuring that. But it's about being more aware. So as Lena was just pointing out, that self-reflection is what helps us to be better parents. So asking yourself in the moment, why did I just do that? And does that align with the parent that I actually want to be? And if the answer is no, then okay, what can I do differently next time this situation pops up? How do I want to show up as a parent in this moment? And is there anything else from my history that is stopping me from being able to do that in the moment? And if the answer is yes, then maybe it is about seeking your own help to actually deal with that more permanently so it stops showing up in your parenting.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for all of you for coming, and also for Dr. Kelly Cassidy and Lena. Thank you so much for coming. And I think our pastor has something for you both. Look, we really appreciate that you all take the time to come this afternoon. It's very eye-opening, I think, to some, and even for myself to learn. I mean, I knew about Lena, but I didn't know to that extent. So, yeah. Okay. Okay. So thank you so much. Our pastor has got some flowers
thank
for
you
you.
so much,
Hope you
Kelly
really
and
like.
Lena, you're very blessed. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So who wants to have this type of events in the future? So hopefully we can organize something like this again, sometime in the future. And look, if you are interested, feel free to contact Henry and see what topics you want to talk about in the future. Okay, thank you.